This week's Torah portion of Vayetze, we have the famous story of Jacob running away from his brother Esau. And he goes to sleep and he has a dream. And in the dream he sees a ladder. And the ladder goes to heaven. And he sees angels descending and ascending on this ladder. And then a God appears to him in the dream. And God says to him, Anochi Elokei Avraham Avicha. I am the God of your father Abraham. Velokei Yitzchak. And the God of Isaac. And then God proceeds to make to him great promises that I will watch over you, I'll protect you, you will return to this land in safety and security. But the question is, God is talking to Jacob, the third patriarch. And what does he say? I am the God, Anochi Elokei Avraham Avicha. I am the God of your father Abraham. Abraham wasn't his father, Abraham was his grandfather. And then he goes on to say, Velokei Yitzchak, and the God of Isaac. He doesn't mention that Isaac is his father. So he calls the grandfather father, and when it comes to this, the actual father, he just says the God of Isaac. There's a very powerful chidah that explains this verse, and he says like as follows. The chidah says that Jacob was 15 years old when his grandfather Abraham died. But in those 15 years, he had such a close bond and relationship and attachment to his grandfather that his grandfather Abraham would call him my son. And therefore the Torah says that God says to him, I am the God of your father Abraham, because he was more like a father to you than a grandfather, which is a powerful lesson unto itself, that a grandfather could have a relationship with a grandchild like a father. I've met countless people who told me, my grandfather saved my life. If not, my father wasn't present, but my grandfather, that's what's made me who I am today. The relationship with a grandparent or grandmother could be as powerful as a parent. That's what the Chidah says. But why doesn't it say Elokei Yitzchak Avicha, the God of Isaac your father? He was his father. And here the Chidah says something again very powerful. He says that because we know from last week's parsha, Isaac loved Esau more than he loved Jacob, the Torah doesn't call Isaac the father of Jacob. It just says the God of Isaac. Because since the love of the father was towards the other son more than Jacob, Jacob didn't have that relationship where he felt that he was equally loved in his father's eyes, and therefore the Torah doesn't call Isaac the father. And again, a very powerful lesson. The lesson is, and God is telling this to Jacob, why? Because Jacob is being taught, you're going to establish the 12 tribes of Israel. You're going to have a big family, 12 sons. Remember to love all your kids equally. Because to earn the title of father, you can't just give birth to children biologically. You have to love your children and never love one child over the other. And sadly, Jacob makes the same mistake with Joseph. We know he shows favoritism to Joseph, and all the Jews go into Egypt, slavery, because of that favoritism. You know, it says in Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Akiva says that the Jewish people are beloved by God. Chavivim Yisrael. Why? Because we're called God's children. But then Rabbi Akiva says, Chiba Yisera no das lahem. There's an additional love given to the Jewish people. That what? That God told them that they're loved. You see what Rabbi Akiva is saying? The fact that God loves the Jewish people is they're beloved. But God didn't just love them in his heart, so to speak. He let them know in the Torah, no das lahem. He communicated to them, I love you. Banim atem l'Hashem lokechem. And that's the additional love. A lot of times people say, well, of course I love my kids. Don't they know it? No, you have to actually tell it to them. Imagine a person who's poor. He needs money. And you say, you know what, I'm going to go to the bank and make a deposit in his account. And you deposit $10,000. But you don't tell the guy you made the deposit. He still thinks he's poor. He's walking around bankrupt. He thinks he has no money. He doesn't use his his debit card or write a check because he thinks he has no money in his account. It's not enough to put the money in the account. You have to tell him, I made a deposit in your account. So too with love. You have to make the spiritual love deposit in your children's bank account, but then you have to tell them, I love you. They have to know it. I want to share with you a story I once heard from a rabbi, and he said that he had a member of his shul who was a very successful, wealthy man, and he said to him, I want to tell you what the happiest day of my life was. He said, my mother survived the Holocaust, but she lost her husband and 8 children. And married my father after the war, and I was born late in life, the only child to my mother's second marriage to my parents. And he said, my mother never told me she loved me. She would never say those words, I love you. And one day I asked my father, I said, Dad, why doesn't mom ever say she loves me? And My father said, you know, Mom lost her husband and 8 children in the Holocaust. And she lives with that trauma every day. And she's afraid to get too close to you, to say the words, because she still fears, God forbid, something terrible could happen, like another Holocaust, and she'll lose you. And so she's afraid to say I love you because she doesn't want to get too attached. And he said, I lived with this. He said, my mother got old, she got sick, she was in the hospital and she was dying. He said she was in and out, you know, like very, very ill. And he said at one point she woke up and she turned to me, I was sitting by her bedside saying Tehillim. And she turned to me and said, I want you to know, I never told you this, but I am so proud of you and I love you so much. And he said, shortly after that, my mother died. And this man said, I had many happy days in my life. The day I married my wife, the day my children were born, the day I married off my children. This is an older man. He says, I had great successes in business. I had days that I sold big buildings and made tens of millions of dollars in one day. He said, but the happiest day of my life, without a doubt, was the day my mother said to me, I am proud of you, my son. I love you. And so the Torah teaches us every single day, never fail to communicate to your children and to the people you love how much you love them. And also that if you're a grandparent, you could have a relationship with your grandchild as though you are a parent.